Okay, today we're going to be learning how to make the Popup Small Ruins. And this piece is pretty simple. And I'll be your host today. I'm Mike Evans. And so let's get started. For this project, you're going to need a couple of things. First is a copy of your Popup Small Ruins PDF printed out, double-sided on cardstock. I'm using 80-pound cover gloss for mine, and if you find that your front and back aren't lining up very well when you have the printer automatically print double-sided, it might be better to print single-sided and then flip them over yourself and then print the other side. That I found helped me get better alignment out of my home printer. So we've got these all printed out. You're going to need some backing material. In this case, you're going to need, if you're going with rectangles, you're going to need two 6-inch by 14-inch pieces of backing. And you're going to need, you're not going to need a bone folder for scoring. A dried out ballpoint pen is going to serve you much better in my experience. That's me. You know, you do what you got to do. And you're also, some scissors could come in handy. Double-sided tape and a ruler. Okay, we got all our supplies. Let's get started. First thing we're going to do is assemble the base. So first part of that is cutting out these base parts. Because we're going to trim these later to fit the mat board, we don't really have to cut them very precisely, except right along this middle edge, because that's going to be our center line. We want that at this point to look nice, overlap in the right spot. So just kind of cut these out in a generally pretty close manner for now. And this again is going to be center line piece, so we want that to be cut out as we piece it together. And these pieces at the tops of these little triangular parts need to be trimmed so there's no white on there. So that those will match up with the larger sections. Okay, and now we attach it together using glue or tape. For this demonstration, I'm using double-sided tape. That is for two reasons. One, it's just faster. I don't have to wait for it to dry right now while I'm showing you. And two, I really do feel like double-sided tape gives you a better longevity than, like, say, an Elmer's glue or a white glue would. Just because long term it's a little more flexible, and for a pop-up that's got, it's moving parts, you don't want those to come apart after a couple of tries. Kind of stuck that on the wrong spot there. So line it up better than I did that first time, and the textures should line up, and you just lay it on down. I'm going to bring a little more light over here. I'm sure you guys can see fine. Alright, there we go. A little more light for me. And now a little bit of excess material right here. Trim that. Okay. Remember, this is paper. You just printed it out. If you mess up, you just print out another one. Or, if there's something messed up on the surface, just get a pen, draw something in there. This is not, it's not a process where you have to worry too much about, oh, I made a mistake, I can't fix that. You can fix your mistakes. No mistake is so bad that it cannot be fixed. Alright. And now we can tape the whole thing together like so. That goes there. Line up those textures. And it'll look real nice. Okay, so something I forgot to do is to score the center line. And to do that, take my dried out ballpoint pen, take my ruler, and I use the pen to make a sort of crease of compacted paper there so that when this folds, it folds right along that crease and keeps everything nice and neat. So that's that part done. Trim these off a little bit better. I'm not trimming all the way in just yet because I'm gonna be cutting these down when I cut the mat board down to fit. So for backing material, I like to use mat board, but really like any sort of cardboard or binder's board or whatever board you can get that's, you know, either something you have on hand or it's something that is affordable. I like to use the binder's board. I like to use the mat board because it's thin, but it has a little weight to it, you know? I thought about basing these on like sheet metal, and then I thought, wow, that's a dumb idea because I'd have to store a bunch of sheet metal and it'll be really sharp. I like cut myself on it a ton of times. But on the other hand, you could magnetize it. You could play your game like, if you had magnetized minis, play your game like on a wall or something. Which, you know, is, you know, not for everyone, I guess. When my wife was in high school, she had a history teacher, I think it was a history teacher, who would reenact famous battles on the ceilings of his classrooms with little army men. So the kids would come in every day and like the army men would have moved to be where the troops were that day. And then like when the battle finally happened, she said there'd be little like arms and legs and like pieces of army men all over the ceiling from the carnage. And that's how an entire school became scarred for life. It's always weird for me when teachers enjoy their jobs. That I don't know why, but like, it's weird. I don't remember. I had one or two teachers that had that level of enthusiasm, I guess, growing up. And a bunch that had that level at one point. Constant dealing with high schoolers had drained it from them, along with all joy. Alright, so to get this to attach in the right spot, it's important to leave a little gap between your two base pieces. You don't want it to be like this. You want it to be like this. Okay? So what I like to do is put one piece on top of the other piece, and then make that ensures that I've got a gap. Just line that up, because if there's no gap there, the pop-up doesn't want to sit as flat. Anything you can do to remove that tension that's going to pull everything down when it pops up, you want to do that, because the paper's been sitting folded inside and it doesn't want to move. It has to stay folded up. So if you got your bases right next to each other, it'll still open. I've done a ton like that. This is a lesson that I learned after making a bunch of these, and they're fine. But I found that I have to get them out like 15 minutes before my gaming session starts, so that they have a chance to like settle, right? This way, you open it up and it's ready right away. You don't have to plan ahead. So you see, like, there's still a gap. There's a gap there, okay? All right, so at this point, you cut off your extra mat board. You can do that with X-Acto knife, scissors, or I take this as a chance to use my favorite tool in the world, my cutter, paper cutter. Love this thing. I don't know if you guys remember like watching teachers enviously and being like, dang, I wish I could use that paper cutter. They're cutting so much paper at once. But they specifically told us that the students couldn't use it. So, went out and got my own. They're not, I mean, they're not that expensive. I feel like this one might have been, it was like $80 or something. So, maybe they are that expensive. Okay, well that mat board got weird. Make sure you got a good clean edge. If you don't, again, this is paper, man. You can fix anything that has to do with paper. You know, glue, X-Acto knife. Okay, so you've got your base now. Now's a good time to clean off the extra stuff from your workspace. Make sure that's neat, and now we can move on to the parts. Now this one is simple. Doesn't have many parts, and we can knock this out pretty quick. So the first thing we need to do is score the pages. Score the page. That means you start out on one blue arrow. There's usually a line leading to another blue arrow, and you just make sure that there's an indentation with your dried out ballpoint pen or whatever you're using to score from one side to the other. Okay? This one says score to the intersection, and that's where it's got an intersection with all these other lines. So you're just going to score to right here. You're not going to score all the way across. If you do, not a big deal. It's not going to mess anything up. But it's not what it's supposed to do, you know. You're supposed to do what I told you. All right. So once you've gone ahead and scored along all those lines, which hasn't taken very long because it's not a big thing, let's start with part number 1, clearly marked with the number 1. And what we're going to do is cut out the interior space first. And I've had this X-Acto knife blade for all of like 3 minutes. This is the longest I've used one without it snapping. I'm going to try to go this whole time, guys. It's my goal. This X-Acto knife blade will not snap. There it goes. Okay. That took like it was so much faster than I thought it would be. Alright, so we got part number 1, cutting it out. And part number 1, we could glue to part number 2 first, before we glue it down or attach it to the base. But the way the instructions say it is attach to the base first, so we're going to do that. And we're going to bend this part first though, where we scored, because we know that's going to need to be bent later. Okay, so when you're gluing the pieces down, you match up these things, you match up the ground textures. This one says 1 to B. You want to make sure that the tops of the numbers and letters are next to each other and that the textures line up on the spot you're gluing to, for the most part. There's a few cases where the textures will not line up, but in these cases, on this one, they do. And then we move on to part number 2. So that's, and part number 2 is sort of just the other side of part number 1. And together, they are gonna do a lot of the work on this pop-up. So put some double-sided tape on part 2 to B. At this point I usually make a joke, because every single one of these has a 2 to B, you know? And I can be like, to be or not to be. And it's always 2 to B, because that's the one you're gluing. So enjoy that. And now 2 needs to be attached to 1. So we'll put some adhesive on that surface. And this is a spot that is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting on this pop-up. Okay, so we got that piece. Boom. Pops up. Now we're just going to add a little porch in front of that, and that is part 3. Part 3 is just one part. It's pretty complex. It'll take a while to cut out. Again, I like to cut out the interior cuts first, because once you cut out the outside, it gets all bendy and becomes harder to get quite as good a control, accuracy. Not that you have to be that accurate with this. I mean, make a little mistake, it's not a huge deal. If you actually cut off something you're not supposed to cut off, the back has a lot of extra texture that you can just glue over that and attach it back together, you know? This is not a process that, I mean, it's going to benefit from some care. You do not want to cut yourself with an X-Acto knife, okay? Which is why I always pull the blade towards me, but not like super close towards me. And if you're ever doing something with an X-Acto knife where you think, if I slipped a little bit, I would cut myself, that's when you stop doing that thing, because you don't want to do that. I used to work as a teaching assistant in college for a little while. And the injuries they said that we saw the most, I didn't actually ever see anybody cut themselves with an X-Acto knife, but it was people cutting themselves with X-Acto knives. Because, you know, you get it in front of a table saw and it's naturally scary, but an X-Acto knife, you're like, oh, I can handle this. It's just like using a pen, except with a blade on it. Alright, so this is part number 3. Part number 3 is a little bit more complicated in terms of the folds. These pillar parts need to go down. These base tabs need to be coming out away from the piece, like that. And then this piece is going to go down. These two parts are going to go up. And this part is going to go up. So the part needs to look like that when you're done. And we're going to attach that all right here. Let's start with the base, because that's going to hold everything in place. 3 to be 1, just line that up with the little outline there, and 3 to be 2. If you have excess tape, just trim that off. And glue that down to 3 to be 2. The textures are going to line up, and it's just basically going to go in that little rectangle anyway, so that one's not complicated. Let's go ahead and do this piece on the back. We're going to need a little piece of adhesive, and we'll attach it to this tab here that's going to fold down over this little ladder area. So that's 1 to 3, 2. There we go. And then we're going to get another little piece of adhesive to attach this one that just says 1 to 3. And we're going to do that. Right there. And we've got an even smaller, I'm going to cut out a little triangle of adhesive for that one. This is a spot that, quite frankly, would be easier to glue, but then I'd have to get up and find the glue. It'd be almost like 12 or 13 steps away from me. So we'll just tape it. And then this last piece, once it's taped, we're going to be done. And we'll see if it works. It's always the trick. And I got a little extra tape on that one. I'll trim that so that it fits. Match up the textures, match it up with the lines. Attach that right there. And we're done with that celebratory phone call. All right. There it is. The small ruins. You get 2 of them. Really a jumping thing. Jump right across. Okay, thanks for watching. You guys have good luck making your own, and you should be able to find them on stonehavenmini.com. Thanks.